When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies, and today we have a community birth story. This is a really fun one because we are talking about 2 births and doing a little comparison and a little bit of what we learned from birth to birth. So I'm speaking with Rachel Eisman, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a public sector consultant and a mom of 2, and she spends her days working with the chaotic and wonderful city of New York. And when she's not working, she likes writing and reading and loves hanging with her kids. So let me tell you a little bit about what Rachel shares with her birth story. Now, first of all, we often hear birth stories that are really long. Not Rachel. Her births are quick. And what I love is that she talks a little bit about what she learned, what she feels her body learned from her first birth that helped her, in her words, have a shorter, less painful second birth. And I think anyone out there looking for their second birth, I'm sure that's what you want to hear. And so it's just really wonderful to hear Rachel sharing about her first birth compared to her second, what she learned, what she embraced, and also some of the issues she had with her epidural. I love talking about epidurals because I feel like sometimes people think that is the one golden ticket. You use that and all is great, but sometimes they don't work as well as they could. And I like that Rachel shares that because I want to make sure that when people choose that tool, that they have a full understanding of how it works and then sometimes how it may not. So I'm excited for you to hear about this. Now, before we get to Rachel's birth story, I always love to give updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. So really the best way to find out our current class schedule and any online classes and on-demand classes and workshops and our teacher training, check that out on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. And while you're there, you will notice that we have over 400 podcast episodes you can look through. We have probably just as many blogs that you can look through. I've done the blog for, I don't know, like 16 or 17, if not more years. So there's a ton of information and we have free videos online and we have a weekly newsletter that always has a fun tip to help you during your pregnancy or postpartum. So much information. Just head to our website, check all that out. And I again want to give a special thank you to those who listen because you have been adding to our Google reviews and our podcast reviews, and it helps people find us. So I just want to say thank you for that. And another thank you is for those that have written in about podcast ideas or being a guest. After over 400 podcast episodes, I love fresh ideas and new guests. So thank you for doing that as well. Okay, I think that's enough from me. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy Rachel's birth story.
Your favorite local grocery stores like Kroger, Ralph's, Fred Meyer, and more are now delivering on Uber Eats. Get 40% off your order of fresh, quality ingredients. Whether you just got home to an empty fridge or suddenly got a craving to whip up something new, you can get everything you need delivered in as little as 25 minutes. Get 40% off your order with code Kroger2026. Plus, members get $0 delivery fees. Order now on Uber Eats. Orders of $30 or more save up to $25. Ends 4/30/26. See app for details.
Hi, Rachel. How are you? I'm doing really
I'm
well.
good. How are
I'm
you?
so excited to hear your birth story. I love birth stories, but I especially love birth stories when I get to watch people go through that whole transformation from pregnancy to postpartum. And I love that you've been in our postnatal classes. So thank you for sharing. So let's
No,
jump
thank you for
in
having
with
me.
just share a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Rachel. I live on the Upper West Side. I have two kids. Is Nate is 2.5, and Ayala is 3 months. I am a public sector consultant, so I mostly work with New York City, and I really love getting to feel like I have an impact on the place
Oh,
where I
that's
live and now where
wonderful.
my kids
I
live.
didn't realize. That's a fun thing about learning a little bit more about the students is I actually thought you were a lawyer. I don't know. I had lawyer vibes. But like I have kind of like, I think it's like
Uh-oh.
something meticulous. I think that's what it is. And, like that, because you have to be
Okay.
meticulous. And I'm guessing both careers. And when I then get to know the students and find out more about their background, it's really fascinating. So I'm excited. So let's jump in. Before we get to your birth story, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between your first and second birth because they seem like they were very different. And you'd said something about your body learned so much from the first birth that the second birth felt easier. Let's talk about that. What felt different both physically and mentally?
Yeah, I do feel like my body learned. And what I mean by that is, well, first of all, it was a lot less painful. Um, when I went into labor the first time, I remember, let me just move slightly farther away from the baby and I'll start that part again. um, yeah, I do feel like my body learned from one birth to the other. And what I mean by that is that, well, first of all, mostly I think it was less painful. I felt like my body had been through it before. And so when I started having contractions with the second, I expected them to escalate much, much worse, much faster, just based on how it had felt the first time. And it didn't. I got to the hospital actually the same amount dilated both times and was just in so much more pain the first time around.
What do you think that
So that
was?
was a
Do you
big
think
part of it.
it was new and therefore kind of unexpected of how intense it felt? Or like the second time you're like, been here, done this, no, I can do it. What do you think that was?
I think there's definitely a mental component. But just from what I remember, I think there was a physical component too of it genuinely. I just felt like, oh, my body knows how to handle this a little bit better. It was the same with breastfeeding. I felt like it was just my nipples were less sore, something about it. And I'm sure that there was a mental component as well. And I was prepared for it in ways that I was not prepared the first time around. But I had multiple moments where I kept thinking to myself, I think my body has learned and
Oh,
I
I
think
love
this
hearing
feels a
that.
little
And there
better.
is something interesting statistically, second time births tend to be quicker. And now I'm shooting from the hip. I'm totally hypothesizing, but I wonder if that's because maybe there's less fear and the body does have this because we know that there's that fear, tension, pain cycle. So maybe the second time, if there's less fear and things are just flowing better. I don't know. I'm just thinking, but maybe, what do you think?
Definitely could be. And there definitely was a lot less fear the second time
So,
around. So I
what
can
were
say
some of
that
the
for
things from
sure.
your first birth, like the coping skills or positions or mindset tools that carried over and helped you in your second?
So I think most of what I learned is that I went in without much of a plan the first time around. And I was okay with that. I was not, I'm not the type of person to feel like I needed a birth plan. I really liked and trusted my doctor, and she is kind of a go with the flow kind of person. And so I really felt like, well, I know I'm giving birth in a hospital. I trust my medical team. I will just go and the baby will be born. And I didn't really think much beyond that. And I think I also knew that my husband would be there with me, and he is much better at advocating than I am. And we kind of know that between the two of us. And so I was prepared to sort of be passive and just let things happen and then let him know if I needed something, and he would kind of take care of it for me. And I think what I learned before the second time around is that there are some things that I wanted. The epidural did not really work for me the first time. I thought that I had it in my power to kind of explain things better and get it to work better the second time. I had a feeling things would be fast, so I let people know right away. So there were just certain things that I sort of then knew about the experience that I knew I wanted, whereas I just kind of went into it blindly the first time.
And how do you feel, not to rehash the whole first birth, but looking back, was it easeful? Was it challenging? I mean, you said the epidural didn't really work, so that has its own challenges that we can talk about. But how do you view it? And then we're going to talk about really kind of compare to your second.
Yeah, and I mean, the comparison is the best way for me to answer because I think I didn't really know the first time around. It was also pretty fast. But it definitely had a bit more drama. The heart rate was dropping. I was changing positions a lot. They had to bring the baby over to the incubation table when he was first born. He wasn't crying. He had the cord around his neck. So there were just more things that still all went well. Everything ended well. I have a very lovely, happy, healthy baby. But it definitely had, I think, more ups and downs. It was also more painful. And so going into the second one, I think it was really the pain that I felt like I can manage this better this time. I know more of what to ask for. And I think part of, I would say, the problem the second time around is that I expected it to be painless because I thought I knew how to kind of set that up for myself. And that was not the case. So I would honestly say that I drew on more of the coping skills from prenatal yoga the second time around than the first time. Because the first time was just so much of a kind of flurry and overwhelming, chaotic experience. And the second time I was a bit calmer and more able to draw on things that I had learned.
And maybe I'm reaching, or maybe I'm speaking from my own experience and drama, because my first birth was challenging and I was super anxious I would have another challenging birth. That I actually had to have like a sit down with my midwife and kind of decompress about the anxiety I was bringing because of the first. Do you feel like there was anything that you were carrying over from your first heading into your second? Any anxiety or nervousness or fear?
I think it was almost a bit of the opposite, and that caused me problems as well because I was expecting it to be. So honestly, the worst part to me about the first birth was that the epidural didn't really numb my vaginal opening. And so the contractions felt much less, but then I completely felt the crowning and I felt the stitches afterwards.
They could have numbed it.
I did tell them, and I did not like that doctor I had the first time because she said, "This is weird." And then
she could use local. She could use a local anesthetic, which is what people do when they don't have an epidural and need stitches. Oh, I'm so sorry, your poor pelvic floor.
So that was what I felt like. Well, this time around, I know that doesn't have to feel like that. I'm just going to tell them. And so I did advocate for myself more, but that does not necessarily translate to a pain-free experience. So I think I was almost underprepared the second time around because I thought I would be able to kind of fix some of the things that went wrong the first time.
Let's actually do it. Let's jump into your story. The mic is yours. I'm excited to hear.
Sure. So, well, like I said, the first time around had more of its complications, but it was still pretty fast. And so my OB had said to me,
like, how fast was fast
this time around? Don't wait. With the first, I labored at home a fair amount. I would say, I don't know, probably 3 hours at home because I was very concerned that they would turn me away at the hospital. So I waited as long as I could kind of handle. And then I got to the hospital around 1 a.m. and baby was born at 5:45.
For the first time, that is pretty fast. Yeah.
So I knew that there was a good chance that this time around would be faster. And my OB had said the same thing. And she said, don't stay around timing at home, just get to the hospital. And so all I really did was wait to feel steady contractions. And it couldn't have been more perfect in a lot of ways. My mother-in-law had already gotten here a couple days earlier. So we didn't have to worry about finding childcare for my toddler. He had crawled into our bed that morning. And I think it was around 7 a.m. I started feeling some contractions. I woke up. I looked at my son sleeping peacefully next to me. I looked over to my husband. I said, I think it's time to go. My son kind of woke up right at that moment. And we said, we're going to the hospital to get your baby sister. And he went downstairs to hang out with grandma. And it was just kind of insane timing. And again, it wasn't that painful. And from my experience with the first time, I thought that it would have to be more painful for this to really be, I guess, maybe not true active labor, but just advanced stages of active labor. And so I assumed that when we got to the hospital, I would be less dilated, there would be more waiting. But both times I arrived at 4.5 centimeters. And I told them in triage, the first time around was pretty fast. I have a feeling this will be faster. Can I get a room? And I was also lucky that my doctor was on call that day, and I really, really like her. So she stopped in and she said, make a lot of screaming sounds. If they think you're in pain, they'll get you a room.
That's really good advice. Oh my gosh. Okay. Listeners, jot that down.
Right. So I was able to get a room fairly quickly. And I told them that I did want an epidural. And even the first time around, I barely had time to get it. So I knew we had to move kind of fast. And so they brought anesthesia in. I got the epidural. At this point, the contractions are just starting to get a little bit more painful, but I still felt like it was really manageable. And I don't know if it was just I was calmer, I was breathing better, or it genuinely hurt less, but I didn't feel like I was getting to that unbearable point that I remembered from the first time. But I wanted to just kind of make this a smooth experience now that I knew that at least the epidural didn't have any negative impacts, which was not entirely true this time, but we will get to that. So they got that set up. And this time I was just more vocal about, I still feel a lot of pain on my right side. They had anesthesia come back in and she did a little test with an ice pack to see where I could feel it. And I could still really feel the coldness. So they kind of upped the dose, which still didn't fully kick in. But at this point, a nurse came in to set up my catheter, which I don't think I even had time for the first time around. So I was surprised. I didn't remember that part. And literally, as she was inserting it, my water broke and burst across the room. And so that was interesting. I felt and heard this little, and then there was just this spray of liquid, which did have some meconium in it. So I was a bit concerned, but the nurse didn't seem overly concerned. And she just said, we'll just continue to monitor and we'll check on baby when she comes out. And everything turned out to be fine. So that was the exciting part of that. And then I was just really still kind of waiting to see if the epidural would fully kick in. I was lying on my right side, trying to get it to spread a little bit more. Things were getting pretty painful at this point, so I was relying more on my breathing. My husband and I were alone in the room, and my doctor just was making her rounds and stopped in and said, "How's it going?" And I said, "I'm feeling a lot of pressure." And so she came to check and she said, "Let's get this baby out." There was no nurse in the room. She turned to my husband. She said, "Go get a pair of large gloves, move that table." And she essentially instructed him, and he helped pull the baby out. And I'm not kidding. It was 3 pushes and there was baby. And that was it.
There's something so beautiful and intimate about that. And what was your husband's response? Like, what? I'm getting loud.
I think, yes, it was definitely a bit of what and shock, but he is so happy. He was so I think felt so special to have that experience, and to feel like he was really a part of it. And he literally, held her head as she came out. And I think he was just in awe and in love. And it was very wild. And I couldn't believe I couldn't believe we had a baby. I was expecting so much more. And that was it. We entered the room at 8:30 and she was
Oh my
born
gosh. First of all,
at
I love
11:30.
that your doctor didn't tell you to not push if you were having that urge to push. Like, because I've seen that where they need to set everything up and get the right people, but she really did go with the flow. Like, okay, this is happening. These are the people we have, and we're going to make it work. And that's looking at the reality instead of making it like a big, overwhelming event. Oh, I do like your doctor. You can tell me later who it was. So before we keep going on, we are going to have to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm so excited to hear more because you did talk about the epidural not totally working. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Your planet is now marked for death.
Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps is now streaming on Disney+.
We will protect you.
As a family.
Light him up, Johnny!
Marvel's first family is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
That is fantastic.
And critics say it's one of the best superhero movies of all time.
Oh!
Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
What time is it, Ben? It's clobber time!
Okay, so we are back. All right, so your husband just helped deliver baby, which is fascinating and amazing, and what a special memory. And then what else are you going to share about that?
I think I didn't appreciate in the moment how special that was. And now I feel so, I don't know, honored is not the right word, but just, it's so special that we got to have that experience. And I still just cannot get over how fast it was. I think I expected more of the labor to progress quickly because that did also happen the first time, but there was also a lot more pushing involved the first time. And so even when my doctor said, okay, this baby's coming out, I expected it to be a bit more involved. And I couldn't believe that
Did the speed
there was
of
already
it
a baby.
feel ungrounding, or did you just kind of go with it?
I think it was a bit ungrounding, but for such a split second, because then there was a baby and I was relieved that it was over, and then I got to hold her and we had a really amazing golden hour, which with my first, he also, they had to bring him over to the table, but he ended up being okay. He just then didn't latch as well. And it was a little bit more, I think from my end too, a little bit just more chaotic feeling. And this was so much more blissful. And she latched really well. And my husband and I were just feeling on top of the world. And there was something really magical about it. Although I will say that I did have a thought when she first came out and she was red and pudgy. And I thought, oh no, what if she isn't cute?
But she is.
She is. She absolutely is. But I had this moment, and I think it came more from this fear of what happens if I think that one of my kids is cute and one isn't? I'm going to have to work so hard to make sure they never know that. And then it wasn't a concern about 10 seconds later, but something was going through my mind.
I like the reality.
Like, oh no. What do I do if I don't think she's
I'm glad
cute?
you actually shared that because, I'm sure people have had those thoughts or also deal with that. So thank you for sharing that. I want to circle back to the epidural situation because it is really interesting that about 10% of epidurals don't work 100%. And that's something we talk about in prenatal all the time. And I never try to make people scared, but I'm like, can't rely just on that because what if you're someone that it doesn't work with? But it's interesting that both times that you had it didn't really work 100%.
So, yeah, I think I just assumed that, maybe my body doesn't react well to epidurals. I was talking to some people after where they thought it was actually a little unusual that it did the same exact thing both times. So I'm not entirely sure because both times it was my right side that didn't fully get the effects. I do think I'm probably somewhat glad to have felt things and have that experience. The second time around, it actually also kept dropping my heart rate. And I'm guessing that was because I asked for more, if I asked for a higher dose, but I'm not, also not entirely sure. So people kept sticking their heads in to check on me. And then I had to just stay monitored and stay on an IV for the rest of the day. And it was totally fine. Nothing else came of it, but my heart rate did drop very low for, I guess, really just during the birth. And then it came back up to normal.
I'm going to hypothesize. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, I just, I would love to hear your hypothesis because I don't really know what was going on.
I'm totally shooting from the hip. I have no idea if this is right, but the fact that you kept saying it was your right side twice, and it does go into the dura space. Do you have any scoliosis?
Not that I know of.
I'm just so curious if there's some curvature or some anomaly in your spine that, like, if that space is not up and down, it's slightly curved. If that is the reason, because once the catheter is left into that space, it should be getting the medicine. And I'm curious if there's a reason that maybe it's spilling more to the left and not to the right. I don't know. I could be 100% wrong, but it is very curious that it was the same situation both times. If there's an anesthesiologist listening, let me know. Let me know your thoughts. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit to introducing your son to his new baby sister. Will you share a little bit about how that went?
It was so sweet. I think we expected it to be generally good because we have a very empathetic and sweet little boy. But he's 2, and we didn't really know how much he understood about what we were saying when we were talking about the baby and mommy's belly and all those things. So one piece of advice that someone had given us, which we took, and I don't know if it would have been different otherwise, but seemed to go well, is we made sure that Ayelet, the baby, was in the bassinet when my son first walked into the room instead of in my arms, so that he could come still feel that I was completely with him, and then we could go meet the baby together. So we did that, and I don't know if it mattered because he didn't really come to me. He walked in with his grandparents, and he went right to the bassinet, and he went boop and booped her on the nose.
That's so cute.
It was so cute. I don't know where he picked that up from or knew to do it to this baby. And then, he was interested in her for a few minutes. We sat over the bassinet together and looked at her, and then he lost interest and he just hung out with us for a while. So it really couldn't have gone better. And that's kind of how he's been since. He really, really loves her. He feels so good when he can get her to smile or get her to calm down. He's still 2, so we still watch out for any 2-year-old type shows of affection. But he really, I think he has had behavioral changes in other ways. This kind of new reality is showing itself in sleep and in more separation anxiety and wanting one-on-one attention. But in terms of his relationship with her, it has really been nothing but positive, and it is so, so sweet to watch them together.
Oh, I love that. I think sibling relationships can be really beautiful and really special. So we're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to share with new and expectant parents? We will be right back.
Looking for a protein shake that tastes as good as it performs? Meet Rockin' Protein Max. Packed with 50 grams of fuel, it'll help you keep up when your day won't slow down. And because it's always creamy and never chalky, every sip tastes great. Even better, it's lactose-free and has 0 added sugar. It's not every day you find a protein shake you actually want to finish. Catch Rockin' Protein in the dairy cooler at a store near you. Rockin' Protein and Shamrock Farms are registered trademarks of Shamrock Foods Company.
Okay, we are back. So, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
So, weirdly, this is my favorite tip, and it came from our baby monitor, which the app would give us weekly tips. And one of them just really resonated with me. And I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was something along the lines of your baby needs love, a relatively clean environment, and food. Everything else is a choice. And I love that. As long as I'm doing my due diligence to make sure that things are safe for my baby and obviously, not doing anything egregious. Everything is a choice. There's no right way to sleep train. There's no right way to feed. There's no right way to anything. It's all about what works for me and our family and my husband. And there's something, I think, overwhelming about that, but also something very, very liberating, because it's not about figuring out what's best. It's about figuring out what's best for you. And nobody can really answer that for you.
Oh, that is great. When you said your baby monitor, my head shot up. I'm like, well, what?
I know.
Honestly, that is fantastic advice. And honestly, it can feel like it takes the pressure off of doing things, quote unquote, right. Because, right, who's to say what's right or not? But what's right for your family is an individual choice. I love that. So how has becoming a mom of two changed you as a person and as a parent?
I do feel more like a parent now that I have two in a lot of ways. I think having one, I was getting used to the idea of being a mom. And there's also just something, I think because we always knew we wanted more, it didn't feel like a full family yet. And so there was something kind of pending in my mind. And now having two, I look around. I mean, I will be in bed some mornings and my son has crawled into bed and my daughter is in her bassinet next to me. And I'm just kind of amazed. Like, I have a family and I am responsible for these children. And I don't think it struck me the same way when I had just one. It felt a little bit more like I could rely on people around me and rely on my parents. And, that's all still true. But something about having two and something about it feeling family, or I'm not sure exactly how to articulate it. I think because we always knew we wanted more than one. I'm a little bit more amazed and shocked that this is where I am right now than I was after having one.
Oh, that's beautiful. And how did it change you as a parent? Has anything changed? That was you as a person. Anything as a parent?
I do, we have to obviously not give all of our attention to Nate. And so I don't know if this is a change. Maybe I was already starting to kind of be aware of this, but there is some more, well, I just can't do that right now kind of feeling. Whereas before, I think it was a little bit more pressure to, I'm the mom, he's the kid, let me make sure all his needs are met at all times. And now there's a bit more of a reality of, I can't be in two places at once. If they're both crying, I have to pick one or, ask someone for help. And I have to kind of be okay with that. So in that ways, I think it's a little bit different where I don't feel as, maybe it's just eased some of the guilt. It's not that I am choosing to not do something for my son because I'm tired, which is also totally fine, but it's hard not to feel guilty about that. And now because something is choosing for me, it just has to be that way and it's okay. And I can help my kids kind of also know that I love them and be okay with that, but I cannot be everywhere at once.
I like that. And I think that's something I'm hoping everyone can hear out there. My husband and I talk about this a lot, that, gosh, I'm not going to get his quote right, but it's like the second one gets the right amount of attention because the first one gets all the attention. And I think that can be a little bit, I'm going to just only speak from my own personal belief, sometimes a little bit of a trap because that first one does get so much attention. And then the second one, I'd be so curious to read books on this. I haven't. But the second one doesn't get quite as much attention, so they learn to kind of go with the flow. And then the first one has to learn, like, oh, I'm not getting all the attention, and that could help balance things out. That's just my own thinking. Also, I'm a second child, so maybe that's just, and I've now watched, and I have two kids, and I've watched my son, who's the older, have to, and even now, and years later, still have to. He still sometimes jumps for the attention, where my daughter kind of knows how to share the attention. I don't know. I'm just kind of, again, thinking, but maybe that's right. Yeah. Oh, this has been so great. Thank you for sharing your story. I love hearing, honestly, about fast births. I feel like so many people share their really long birth stories. So it's fun to hear how things can just go smoothly and move along. So thank you for sharing your two fast birth stories and the difference between them. and just learning a little bit more about you. So thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much.
This has been an episode of Yoga, Birth, Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.